Hello, 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 everybody. I feel like it's been forever since I hosted a virtual book club meeting. I'm trying to go back in my mind. I know it was before I went to the end of the earth. I've been to Antarctica and back. I want to appreciate Mark. I want to say thank you to our featured author, Mark Powell, for his flexibility because my return journey was a little more rigorous than I had expected. But it's just now 7 o'clock, and I'm trying to watch people trickle in. And as soon as I see a few people tick in, I wanted to remind everyone to definitely tell us where you're watching from. Once we have that, it helps us with conversation. And feel free to write comments and questions in live. But if you haven't granted StreamYard permission to use your name, you're just going to show up as Facebook user, and sometimes that's a mystery. But with that, I see a few people have joined us. I'm going to go ahead and get started. First, I want to thank Donette Dunaway Lee for joining me as a co-host. I did not give her much advance warning, and because of that, I just want to quickly just do her bio before I jump into Mark's. For those of you that don't know, Miss Lee is a native Mississippian who moved to Georgia to be near her daughters and granddaughters. She loves to travel and to keep a watercolor journal while she travels on those trips. She's a lifelong reader whose favorite author is Pat Conroy, and thus she participated in the 2022 and 2023 Low Country Literary and Leisure Getaway, which you just got home from. Welcome home. And she's enjoyed contributing to my Lux Low Country blog as a result of her travels. So with no further ado, I want to say hello to the people watching from Dallas, Pennsylvania, and another Dallas so far. Mark, how are you tonight?
Oh, I am so well, Susie, and I'm so happy to be here with you. I just appreciate the invitation so much.
You are so welcome. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to read your bio. You guys, I didn't memorize it, I promise.
Of course.
And then we'll jump right in. So everybody, Mark Powell is the author of 8 novels, including Lioness. Here it is. Woo. Small Treasures, a Siba Okra pick, which was Gallery and Simon & Schuster. You wrote it in 2017, or that's when it was published. A Siba Okra pick and a Southern Living Best Book of the Year. Congratulations. And Hurricane Season, forthcoming this fall. I don't know, is that meaning this fall, 2024?
Yes, out in October.
Awesome.
2023, actually, yes.
2023, yes, let's get the year right. Okay. Great. He has received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Bread Loaf and Sewanee Writers Conferences, and twice from the Fulbright Foundation to, I should just be able to say this, Slovakia and Romania. In 2009, he received the Chafin Award for contributions to Appalachian literature. He has written about Southern culture and music for the Oxford American, the war in Ukraine for the Daily Beast, and his dog for the Garden and Gun. He holds degrees from the Citadel and the University of South Carolina and Yale Divinity School, and directs the Creative Writing Program at Appalachian State University. Wow. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
So, Donette, I'm going to go right to you because you had a great question that we talked about beforehand, and it'll give me a second just to make sure everything's working technically. Do you want to go ahead and start off?
Sure. Mark, as Susie told you, we just got home from being immersed in everything Pat Conroy. And particularly this time, we focused on the Prince of Tides. If you remember, one of his characters, Luke Wingo, wages guerrilla warfare against the government or the developers who are coming into that to take over his island. And I then noticed a question at the end of the summary on Amazon. What pushes people to act violently, and is the violence ever justified. And I think that's the way your summary of the Lioness ends on the Amazon website. You want to answer it?
Well, that's quite the question to start out with, Donette. I will do my best. Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge Pat. I can see those books right there behind Susie. He had such a tremendous influence on my life, both his work when I was younger and in later years when I got to know him really well. He's such a brilliant writer, but he's one of those rare human beings who is actually a better human being than he was writer, which is I think kind of remarkable. I went to the Citadel because of the Lords of Discipline. I didn't so much read those books growing up as I feel like I swallowed them whole. And it's been so long since I read The Prince of Tides, I'd forgotten about that aspect of it. But I think probably I didn't. I think it probably somewhere in the back of my head that was still sort of turning around. I think to some degree I like to think that what I write will always be in some sort of cosmic literary conversation with Pat's work. But to the question, like what drives people to act violently, I think I write fiction to get at the root of questions like that feel almost impossible to answer. I think I write about not necessarily things that interest me so much as things that confuse me and stick with me. And we live obviously in just a regrettably and frighteningly violent age. And what strikes me so often about the violence that takes place is that in the mind of the people carrying out these acts, they feel fully justified. So I've always liked the notion that fiction isn't supposed to smooth over the moral complexity of being alive. It's supposed to dig down into those places. So I tried to start thinking of what is a potential act of violence that would divide people. Were they to hear about it, half the people would think this is a criminal act, and maybe half the people would think this was the act, a justified act, the act of a patriot, an act of someone who loves their country in the sense that they physically love the land of the country. So I wanted to try to think my way into that spot. And so the book's about 300 pages, and it's no spoiler alert to say that there is no definitive answer, of course. But if anyone in the comments has an answer, I'm open to it because I still don't know. But I just wanted to kind of get in that place where I'm thinking about these questions. When might violence be justified? When is desperation enough? And I didn't want it to be like the sort of game you play when you're a kid. Like if you were starving, would you break into a grocery store? Something simplistic like that. I wanted to try to make a situation that was really complex. And I also wanted to make one in which you could argue either side. You could argue that the act that's carried out in the book, which is a bombing, is completely justified, or that it is simply absolutely criminal. And I'm not trying to duck your question at all, Donette. That is just probably the best answer I can give you.
Well, I think it requires a great deal of courage to take on issues like you and other writers do, knowing that there probably is not an answer, and yet you want the book to capture the person that's reading it. And maybe that's why I love to read. I don't know.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think the first job of any writer is to tell a really good story, and digging into those sort of larger ethical and moral questions. Hopefully that's like a secondary pleasure of it. But yeah, the first thing you got to do is tell a story, right? That people want to hear. But I think people won't. Often we read for escape. I do the same thing. This book is not really an escapist sort of novel, because sometimes we do want to escape, but I think sometimes I at least want to be thrust sort of deeper into the complexities of being alive right now, to kind of sit with those problems in a way that gets beyond like a bumper sticker answer. There was a wonderful German poet, Rilke, who said, the job of growing up is to replace the wrong answers with the right questions.
Wow.
And I always think that's such a wonderful response, right? Because it requires this ability to sort of sit with that not knowing, since often the most difficult questions just don't have clear-cut answers.
Fantastic. What a wonderful way to start off. We just jumped in the deep end, as they say.
Yes, we did.
Maybe a cannonball on top of that. But I just wanted to follow up. My question to you tonight, Mark, is reading your bio out loud and digesting it more live, talking to you tonight. You have a book coming out this fall. Prior to Lioness and prior to that, what would be your favorite work that you would recommend to these viewers that are either watching live now or will catch the replay? And tell us a little bit about a different work for just a second.
Oh gosh, Susie. The thing about being a writer is I think you look back over the work you've done, and maybe one reason writers keep writing is they always feel like they didn't quite get it right. But I guess my third novel is, so I grew up in South Carolina in the upcountry, upstate, like northwest of Clemson. And my third novel is called The Dark Corner, and it's set around the area I grew up in. And it's fictionalized, but it is about, I wrote it in around 2007, 2006, 2007, 2008. And it was about sort of America fracturing on political lines. And when you write a book, you sort of immerse yourself in a subject. And for me, at least, when I finish, I feel like, okay, I'm kind of done with that. I feel like I can move on to some other interest. And I did, but I'm bringing this book up, The Dark Corner, because now it feels like we're not done with those issues, like this incredible divisiveness in our country. So I suppose maybe I would recommend that one. And it is, as the title implies, sort of a dark story, but it's, I think, a story about what is ongoing in the United States.
Thank you for that, and I really appreciate your candor regarding why you wrote it then and why obviously people might be able to relate to it right now. I think one of my biggest goals, I used to be very politically involved in Colorado way back when, and one of my biggest goals now is to find common ground with other people that I meet, whether whatever it is, and maybe not go straight into that political conversation, but find out what is common in our lives, to kind of remind us of that. And sometimes I think we discussed it in July or August, or June, whenever we met before. Somebody said books are the only thing, or is one of the last things that we can all talk about in a calm and educated manner, and that helps bring us to common ground. So I want to thank you and all the authors that I learn from every single month in this virtual book club.
Well, thank you for hosting something like this. Part of, I think, we should read books because we enjoy them. That should be the most basic reason. But another reason, I think, is to engage with people and ways of thinking and cultures and places that we otherwise wouldn't. I mean, that's the literature, I think, is the training wheels of empathy, right? It allows us to think our way into other people's lives.
Right.
But I think you're right. Yeah, we have to find common ground.
Yeah, for sure. So I just wanted to read one of the comments that's popped up. I just want to say hi to Shoshana down in Texas. She brought up the fact that one of our other authors that we featured previously was a former FBI agent who goes after domestic terrorism in her novels, and she found that very interesting too. I think she's a good friend of yours, and we just saw her last week. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I do indeed. In fact, we did an event together online for the Conroy Center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, cool. I don't know her terribly well, but she's a wonderful writer and a wonderful person.
I agree. I think she's fantastic. So, Donette, do you have a question real quick before he's going to read his passage? Do you have another follow-up question?
I seem to remember, Mark, do you have some connection? What did we talk about? San Miguel de Allende.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
What was your connection there?
Yeah. So, in, 8 years ago or so, I was on sabbatical from the university, and my family and I were looking for somewhere to go to spend several months. And we wound up in San Miguel, and it was right as the time John Worley's Southern Girl was being published. And his book was the first in Pat's series, Story River, and mine was slated to be the second. This was my novel, a novel called The Sheltering. And I just happened, of course, to notice in his biography that he had spent time there. And so it was funny. We were just two Citadel Southern boys who happened to meet up for the first time in Mexico.
Well, did we also talk about the author Toller Cranston?
Yeah. Oh, we didn't, but we should.
Well, the reason I mentioned that is after I began to think about all of this, I went back and pulled out one of the sketchbooks that I had done when I was there, because our group was able to tour Cranston's home. And I just wanted to show you how he autographed my sketchbook. Can y'all see that? I know you cannot read it.
Can't read it, but it looks beautiful.
But
Yeah,
there
I
he
can see
is.
it now.
Yeah.
And I just that tour of his home made an indelible impression.
I imagine. Regrettably, Toller Cranston had passed away just before my family and I arrived in San Miguel, so I was never able to meet him. But I heard so many stories about him. John Worley knew him. I have another close friend who knew him as well, and they spoke of just his incredible generosity. And I think his art is absolutely stunning. So there is a character in Lioness that's a very extremely fictionalized version of Toller Cranston, but something like that. But I have to tell you the story. This is, I think, quite remarkable. So my family and I.
What book is that in?
It's in Lioness.
Lioness, the one we're talking about now.
Okay,
Yeah,
I missed it. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. Part of it takes place in San Miguel. So my family and I have continued to go back to San Miguel over the years. We feel like this really deep connection. And we were back this past summer just after Lioness had been released. And for the previous year, I had been completely immersed in the book, completely immersed in Toller Cranston's work. And we rent an Airbnb. We go in, it's a beautiful house up on, one of the hillsides around the city. And immediately I'm stopped cold by this enormous portrait in front of me. And I'm like, that's a Toller Cranston. I walk through the house, there's 8 Toller Cranstons in the house. Wow. The woman from whom we rented the Airbnb had bought it from one of Cranston's closest friends, and she had kept the painting intact. So it was just one of those remarkable moments where you feel almost like the universe is winking at you. I just loved it. There was one in every room, and I just sat for a long time in front of those 2 paintings, thinking like, I don't know what this is a sign of, but I'm going to accept it as a good sign that I, by pure chance, wound up in this house, surrounded by this work.
That's amazing.
That is
Mark, I loved what you just said. When you feel like the universe is winking at you, I just have to say that's how I felt all weekend long. It was really neat. Could you read a passage to us? So a lot of people have read your book that are watching, and a lot are going to read your book. That's okay. The way I say that, by God, all this time, you better go read their book. But if you could read a passage that might not have a spoiler, that would be fantastic.
Okay. I'm going to read from the near the very beginning of the book. And actually, this is told by David, the husband of the woman who has been involved in this bombing. And he sort of actually lays out the whole scenario, at least as he believes it to be. And much of the book is uncovering and realizing that what he understood about both the night of the bombing and his wife's life prior to this has been false. So, in September 2018, 9 months after she had left me, and just over 2 years after our son Daniel died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a bomb went off at the Rain water bottling plant in Southwest Virginia, 2 hours north of the home I shared, or once shared, with my wife. Whether Mara died in the explosion is unclear. What is without question is that she was responsible for the blast. carrying inside fertilizer and diesel fuel and a device the FBI believes to be a blasting cap wired to a Tovex trigger. The charge detonated within the actual opening of the well and set the fire that the Tazewell County Fire Department battled until late the following day. By that time, rain had been largely reduced to ashes and the melted plastic of unfilled bottles, a cinder block shell in which machinery smoldered, none of it operable. Not that it would have mattered. The blast had collapsed the borehole, sealing it, and whatever dioxins Mara imagined had poisoned our sun. The interior security cameras were destroyed, but a perimeter feed position near the cut fencing recorded 5 still shots of a figure making what appears to be 3 trips in and 2 trips out. Body hunched, wiry arms pushing what appears to be a plastic garden cart loaded with the ammonium nitrate fuel oil. It was Mara, but also not. What you have to do is construct an alternate life. Your life, but not quite. The distance between the two, no more than the space between your thumb and forefinger, but make that distance everything. Make that distance hum with what might have been. Mara had certainly tried. I've come to believe it was what she was doing those afternoons at the Ashe County group home, or those evenings sitting on the floor at the Kinzers, building a world of what might have been. A world that was nothing if not banal, a world where someone unloads the dishwasher or scrubs a carrot, all of it in the kitchen in the evening half-light, with something on the radio you almost hum. A world of everydayness. We'd almost had it. We'd made bird feeders, pine cones smeared with peanut butter and sprinkled with seeds, and the birds had come. Cardinals, tufted titmice, a single hawk that circled above us on a rising draft. Beneath it, around us, the old barns in the bottomland, and the new houses on the ridge, the giant triangular constructions of timber and glass overlooking the herds of expensive Charolais cattle, white, muscled things that waded into the current. That we'd almost have it, I believe now that was part of what made her act. That and her failure to understand the stakes of saying yes. Yes means possibility, consequence. Yes returns to you in a way that is biblical, a way otherwise reserved for stuntmen and third world theocracies, places where to light yourself on fire for an idea is to become something to someone, if only to yourself.
Wow. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I think that having an author read their own novels is one of the most authentic, I've said this before, but the most authentic forms, because we're hearing it come from you, and it brings a lot more emotion sometimes than when you actually read it yourself. But it's one of my favorite things to ask authors to do, and not everyone is comfortable doing it. So I want to say thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure.
It was very nice. And a comment that I had from the stream was a question real quick about the book again. Shoshana wants to know, did the water plant potentially change their ways? This begs to question what Donette brought up earlier: is terrorism ever justified? In a sense, this is one you feel sympathy for Mara and her anger and for her agenda. I think that's also what we referred to another featured author who wrote about the domestic terrorism involved around animals and things like that. I don't know the answer to that. Did you address that? Did they change their ways, or was there any good that came of violence from that perspective?
Well, I don't think there's any good that comes of the violence necessarily. And what I wanted to keep open in the question is I never wanted to make clear whether or not Mara and her accomplice believe that this plant is pumping out water that is poisoned. It's been poisoned by pesticides. And they believe that they are, of course, doing a great service to keep this out. And I wanted to keep in play the question of whether or not they're right. Because, of course, if they're right, they are taking this extreme step to save lives. But if they're wrong, they're just criminals. But more than that, I also wanted to play, Mara and David, the narrator, have lost their son. And I think there's this thing in life that we so often need our suffering to mean something. We need some explanation for it. And what Mara decides is not that it was just ill luck or the fate or what have you, but he was actually poisoned. She needs someone to blame. So I wanted the question to be I wanted to make it more complicated than just simply a question of like, is this an environmentally responsible thing to do? Could it possibly be? I wanted it to be tangled up with her grief. And because it is tangled up with her grief, I don't think it changes her so much, but I do think it has a profound effect on the narrator. He is the one sort of who is left to tell the tale when the story is over. And what I wanted with David is, I guess, to go back to that Rilke line about replacing the wrong answers with the right questions. My idea for him is that probably when his wife leaves him, he feels deeply hurt and deeply betrayed, but also as if he knows all the reasons. And by the end of the book, he doesn't. By the end of the book, he knows that his wrong answers are gone, and hopefully they've been replaced at least with these right questions. So I don't know if, that's a wonderful question, and I don't know if it changes their ways, but I think it certainly changes the way that the narrator views the world.
Thank you for that. So at this point in the show, I was going to have someone from our virtual book club join and ask you a question. Is that okay?
That sounds wonderful.
Okay. Surprise.
Hey, Dana. Good to see you. What a nice surprise.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Doing wonderful, doing wonderful. Well, of course, I interviewed Mark for the Conroy Center, so I had the pleasure of reading The Lioness back several months ago, and I loved it. And when Jonathan first handed me the book, I thought, oh, great, a book about environmental terrorists. And I'd lived that life for like 7 years, and I thought, this is just going to be, oh, come on. And I went back, and I loved it. I loved the book. I was enthralled by it. I devoured it. I read it in record time. It was great. And of course, my first question to Mark was like, were you an activist? Because that was, the book is written from the perfect activist perspective. I spent over a year getting ready to go undercover with the extremist, and your book, it was just like an extremist had written it. So, yeah, so that was my question. My first question was, were you ever an activist? And I'm not sure if you didn't see that interview, if anybody knows the answer to that. But I was, I thought for sure you had to have been an activist, like in college. So.
Yeah, well, I just have to say, this is maybe 5 minutes before we went online for the Conroy thing. Dana told me, like, oh, do you know my background? And I was like, no. And I was like, oh no, I've done everything wrong. So thank you so much for saying that. I've never been an activist. I'm an introvert. I'm a writer. I'm just, and I have to be honest, Dana, there weren't a lot of eco-activists at the Citadel, at least back in my day.
Well, exactly. Unless you went to school and lived out maybe on the West Coast, because I grew up in Kentucky, it was the same thing. I didn't really know what activists were, and I certainly didn't understand the security culture. So I guess my question is, how much research? How did you research this activist mindset to get everything right? Because you did. You got everything perfect.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I had to research like the practical stuff, like how the practical things would take place, like there's at one point they go to this like homemade zoo and set free these animals. I did a little research on that, and I talked to people. But as far as the mindset, I just think and maybe this is naive of me, but I think there is this uniform line that runs through people, or many people, idealistic people at a certain age, where you want to do something that matters in the world, and you are just, if you're idealistic enough, and I think I was at that age, you are extremely malleable. And that malleability can lead you to becoming an eco-terrorist. It can lead you to becoming just a flat-out terrorist. It can lead you to being a saint, almost like a social worker or something, right? There's this deep inbred need to matter and to change the world, and it's beautiful, and it's also maybe a little bit naive, and most of us kind of grow into a deeper understanding of the world. But I've just met so many people in my life who don't, who like maintain that belief that the world can be made into a much better place. And I tried to conjure them. It's so strange because at the Citadel, I knew so many people who went on and who are often still in the military, and they were wonderfully idealistic people who were entering the military because they wanted to make the world a better place. I later went to divinity school, and I met people who were as radical left-wing activists as you could think of, and I became close friends with both groups. And I think it's because there was this common thing of they really believed the world could be different, and not only did they believe it, they were willing to work for it. So I just tried to conjure that. I mean, I'm sure, like you, one of the pleasures of a writer is you get more than one life. You get to sort of imagine your way into different worlds. It's good to imagine ourselves into worlds that are like ours because we know them, but it's a pleasure to imagine something completely different. I'm about as family oriented, boring person as you're ever going to meet. I spend most of my time driving, children to track practice or something. So to imagine people crawling through the night doing this dangerous thing that they believe to be incredibly noble it's a lot of fun, along with a lot of other things. And I'm so glad you're here too.
Young.
The thing that is so impressive to those of us who are your readers, and that would apply to both of you, imagining something and being able to make it sound authentic are two different things. And both of you can do that.
Oh, thank you, Donna. That's really sweet.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
It's true.
Yeah, that's the ultimate compliment. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I just want everybody to know that I didn't tell Mark that Dana was coming on. So where did we surprise you, Mark? I feel like
you surprised me. You absolutely did, Susie, and you kept me from being nervous again. I would have thought like, Dana found a mistake I made.
She's coming back.
She's coming back. Like, wait a second, that detail. No.
No, that's so funny. So speaking of driving, it's 7:33 p.m. Mark, would you like to do a couple of closing comments before you need to go do a car run, a carpool pickup? And then Dana, if you can stay with us, that'd be great for a couple more minutes. That'd be great. Thanks for helping me surprise Mark.
Sure, it was my pleasure.
Thank you for coming on, Dana. So nice to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Oops. You there, Mark?
I'm right here. Yes.
Okay. I just heard a noise. So if you could just summarize either why everyone who hasn't already read The Lioness, and then whatever else you'd like to say, you have the floor. Go for it.
Well, I'm just a terrible salesman, I'm afraid. So maybe the best reason is to just have mercy on me. It is so. Whenever you write a novel, I think I feel like I'm setting out into you're in a small raft going onto a big sea, and you're trying to cross an ocean and get somewhere. And the goal maybe isn't to get where you think you were trying to go, but just to get somewhere. What I wanted to do in this novel, as I wrote it, obviously, like so many novels, it went in directions that I didn't anticipate. But the one thing I knew I wanted to sort of sit with was that question of when, if ever, could violence be justified? And it just feels every day to me, it feels like a more relevant question as, violent acts take place. But I wanted to do it in just the context in which I could understand. If I wrote a novel about, someone in Afghanistan who decides to fight back against the Taliban, that's the sort of extreme response that I feel like most of us would be like, well, of course, given those circumstances. But what if it was just a man a middle-aged man who happens to be a writer, who happens to be living in the outside Boone, North Carolina, and suddenly his world is just blown apart. What would you do then? How would you act? Because for me, that's for obvious biographical reasons, that's a much more relevant question. So I wanted to put it in this larger issue, maybe in circumstances that the reader could maybe relate to a little more. And I think that's just something we should all do. I mean, we should not take parts in active eco-terrorism. We should all sort of sit with the possibilities that life has. And I know Shoshana had asked a question about this child that's in the cabin with Mara.
Right.
And I would just say that one of the ways I think I would react to something horrific is, I think, given my nature, I would start to imagine almost an alternate existence, which is what the narrator does. And that child in the cabin, Shoshana, is, I think it's his hope that somehow his child and wife are still alive, his refusal to believe what James Agee called the cruel radiance of what is, right? How absolutely uncompromisingly harsh reality can sometimes be. That's maybe my best pitch, but I'm an introvert for a reason, Susie. I'm sorry. I'm not a great pitch man.
That was a great pitch, and thank you for answering Shoshana's question. I was worried I couldn't fit it in, and you just knocked it out of the park. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So, Mark, just in closing, I want to say thank you to you for your flexibility and your willingness to be featured in our virtual book club. And when next time you're in Beaufort, look Dana and I up, or
Absolutely.
If we're up in Appalachian country, maybe we can do the same. Shoshana says thank you to you, and I'll let you go and have you go pick up your cheerleading practice daughter. Enjoy every one of those moments, because all of a sudden they stop, and then you have an empty nest, and that's a weird feeling too. So thanks for your time, Mark.
Such a pleasure. So nice to meet Susie, Donette. So nice to meet you in person. Dana, so nice to see you again. And thank you, everyone out there watching this. I appreciate it immensely.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much. Take care, Mark.
You as well.
So, Dana, thank you for surprising him. Do you think we got him off cuff, off mark? I don't know what the right word is.
Right. Well, Mark is great, and his book really, when Jonathan handed it to me, I really, didn't know what I was in for, and then I just loved it. I thought he did a fantastic job. Because I tell you, I can be a harsh critic, especially on stuff like that, where I worked it and lived it for so long, and I just thought it was great. I thought he did a fantastic job.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to see if Donette wanted to ask you a quick question, and then I was going to remind everybody when we're going to feature you again. I'm just pulling out my calendar. The two of you talk for a quick second, and then we'll let Dana go as well. She has a cute little puppy at home she's got to
I still have problem conceiving of Dana being an undercover FBI. You don't fit the image, the physical.
That's why I was undercover.
Wonderful.
That was why I was undercover, because I didn't look like an FBI agent.
So she got to do her job really well. So for those of you that are watching now live, or for those of you that will watch the replay, sometime last year, I can't remember when, but we read Dana's first novel. And now we're going to read, it was Behind the Mask, correct? Or Beyond the Mask. I get the titles mixed up. Sorry. And then now we're going, in the month of April, we are going to read Behind the Cabin, or Beyond the Cabin. Tell me which one it is, Dana.
Beyond the Cabin.
Beyond the Cabin. Thank you. Do you have a cover of it nearby or no?
I do. There it is.
There you go. All right. Beyond the Cabin. Yeah. And tell us a little bit about it. We're going to read it in April, and then I need to make an appointment for us to do this either end of April or probably May would work out better for me, but we'll talk about that. Tell everybody a summary of it, or your pitch.
Well, Beyond the Cabin is Lexi Montgomery's second undercover mission. Of course, Behind the Mask was her first mission. So Since Lexi had worked one extremist case, she's become the expert in the bureau, and that really happens. You can work one case and suddenly you're an expert. So she's called to South Carolina, the low country of South Carolina, and what they believe it could be an Earth Liberation Front attack. So the beauty of having an undercover agent in the FBI is you can pick them up and move them anywhere you need. So I always wanted to write a book about the Low Country because, of course, Pat Conroy is my favorite author, and he wrote so much stuff about the Low Country. And I love the Low Country. It's my heart, my soul. So I wanted to feature the Low Country in my second book. And so I picked up Lexi, plopped her down in the Low Country, and that's the start of Beyond the Cabin. And really what happens is Lexi gets involved in something, and it turns out to be not really what she was sent down there for. And she has nobody she can trust, nobody she can rely on. But she does befriend a captain because she needs to learn how to navigate the waters and navigate the boat. And that character is near and dear to my heart, the character Captain Meade, because he was based on one of my very best friends in the world, Captain Sandy Vermont. So Captain Meade is Captain Sandy, and Sandy knew I was writing him into the book, and he knew he was a character in the book. Unfortunately, he passed away before the book was ever released, but the book's dedicated to him, and he knew the book was dedicated. I did get to read the dedication to him before he passed away. But so Lexi gets herself in a mess. I mean, she gets herself entangled with some really bad characters down in the Low Country, and she has nobody but herself to rely on. So it gets hot and sticky and humid and deadly.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
It moves quite a bit faster than the first book. So if you've read the first book, fasten your seatbelt for the second one.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Donna, did you have a question for Dana?
No, I don't think so. I've already read that book and I loved it. I haven't read the third one yet, but that's on my list.
Okay.
Well,
the third one's also based on a real case.
Yeah. Are you working on another Lexi book?
No, I'm working on a fourth book now that I'm revising, but it's not a Lexi book. So it's completely different. I changed genres, which is why it's taken me so long doing the revisions. But I left the FBI behind in this one for a while. But I won't leave her I can't let her hang. So I'll probably go back to Lexi at some point.
Awesome. Well, Dana, thank you so much for hopping on tonight as a surprise. Sure. This is a piece of the virtual book club that I love, and I can't always get it coordinated. And I really appreciate you coming on the last minute. And somebody's saying, I read the third book after the first, so I'm glad to be circling back to book 2. Right on, whoever that is. So thanks for your time, and I'll let you go see that cute little puppy. Tell me the type of breed it is again.
It's a West Highland White Terrier. His name is Bodie.
Oh, darling.
Oh, and he's 5 months old, and he's full of energy. Full of energy. Oh, he knows 2 speeds, wide open and sound asleep.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And once he matures a little bit, I hope you can get back out on the water and do some fishing.
Yeah, me too.
Exactly. You brought a baby into the house.
I did. I know. What happened to baby?
Well, thanks for joining us tonight, Dana. We'll be in touch. And thanks for being a part of both 2022 and 2023 Low Country Literary and Leisure Getaways.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. It was nice seeing you again, Donna.
Dana, thank you.
We're just one big happy family.
Yeah.
Have a good night, Dana.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. How do I get out of here now?
I'll get you.
Oh, okay.
It's like Zoom. It's like whoop, poof. Woo. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
All right, Donette. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
I had so much fun.
I'm glad you did. See, it is fun. Even though we can meet in person sometimes when we're geographically challenged, it's cool to do this virtual book club still. I did want to just do a little more book club business. So in the month of March, which we are right now still, we're pushed back a little bit because of the getaway, but we are featuring Stephanie Austin Edwards' novel, What We Set in Motion. And for any of you that did attend the literary getaway, you got to meet her in person 3 different times. Wednesday night, you met her at her workshop, and then she attended the panel. And I can't wait to read her novel. And we'll be meeting with her in April. I will throw up the exact date
You told me the 19th.
of April.
I thought
Yeah, that sounds about right, because I'm leaving to travel again on the 22nd. So we've got a few weeks to finish it. So everybody get out there. I know that her copies were sold out of the Pat Conroy Center. I believe I saw some on Amazon, and you should be able to get it in a different form, maybe library or Kindle or something like that.
I
Before then,
found it on Kindle.
did you?
Yeah, this week.
Good. And then we're reading Dana's book, and then following Dana's book is Kimberly Brock will be the featured author, and The Lost Book of Eleanor Darr is the title for that. And then just know that I'm trying to keep the cover photo in the Facebook group updated with authors as we get them slotted in. And I still have a call and a plea to any of you that are interested in co-hosting interviews like this or talks like this to message me. Shoshana, I hope you're free on that date we just discussed for, I haven't told you the date. Shoshana wants to interview Dana, and you're more than welcome to do it. So let's coordinate making that meeting, Shoshana, if you're hearing me still. Donna, do you have any questions for me before we sign off for the night?
No, I don't, but this was fun, and thank you for inviting me.
You're so welcome. I hope you have a wonderful evening and keep on reading.
Will do.
All
Good
right.
night.
Take care. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.